Today we are talking about the dangerous psychology of conspiracy theories, and this is important because conspiracy theories are everywhere. People are believing in crazier and crazier ideas, and it's extremely important to always use logic and reason and question everything to make sure that you're not falling into something crazy or being manipulated by people, etc. And another reason why I want to talk about this as well is because on my channel, and I've mentioned this a lot, we talk about secret societies and the occult and different things like that, and there's a lot of manipulations going on there. So that's also something that what I want to throw out as well, is that it's good to always understand how to use logic and reason, how to be constantly questioning, and how to constantly be checking yourself to make sure that you actually are being a free thinker and not just falling into some sort of manipulation. So we're talking about a psychoanalytic view of conspiracy theories, or the dark psychology of conspiracy theories, to really see how this happens. And again, this has been very, very prevalent with things going on in the world. I'm sure different conspiracy theories that have gone on, but there's also like a lot of conspiracies in New Age and mysticism and things like that. So this is really important to be on guard about. So we're going to take a look, start this off by taking a look at an article on medium.com by Matthew Nishira. And I definitely recommend checking it out. Medium.com is a cool website. I like it. I don't agree with everything on it. There's so much on there, but it's a website that I enjoy. So check it out. And so this is by Matthew Nishira, and it's called A Psychoanalytic View of Conspiracy Theories. And yes, we're going to talk about lizard people. I get lots of questions about lizard people, so we will be addressing the reptile in the room. I used to think that conspiracy theories were harmless fun. That is, as long as one can maintain a sort of safe distance and not take them too seriously. However, recent events have forced me to do some deeper thinking. And this is really important. And that's the reason I jokingly said the reptile in the room, or the elephant in the room, is because it does come with like a lot of spiritual and New Age stuff. And I get questions like that about not even just about reptiles, but like, is the moon hollow and is the earth flat? But the reptile thing usually has more to do with conspiracy with regard to like reptiles and the government and stuff like that. So this is important thing to take a look at. And so Matthew continues here by saying, where does entertaining wacky ideas as harmless fun turn into cultish behavior that has tangibly harmful effects on society? What causes people to cross the line from morbid imagination to its real life enactment? I'm going to be telling you here too as well. I grew up in a strict Christian household, was indoctrinated into Christianity, and there is a large parallel between religions and conspiracy theories. They work in a very similar way. So we're going to be taking a look at that as well. And you can see, where does entertaining wacky ideas as harmless fun turn into tangible harmful effects on society? You can easily imagine, people who talk about ideas like, and it can not just conspiracy theories, but anything. When you start talking about angels and gods and all that and whatever, like, ooh, maybe that's fun. But if you start taking it literally, guess what? Now you're going to have wars where people are killing each other because of whose God is the right God. And this is really, really important, where I talk about the dangers and the harm of mainstream religion because it's taken literally and it's not taken metaphorically. If it was taken metaphorically, it's just a story. It's fine, no big deal. But it's when it's taken literally that it becomes a problem. And we're going to see a similar idea with conspiracy theories, that it can turn into a very big issue. And it can be used as a manipulation. It can be used as a control system. It can be used in so many different ways. So let's continue here. It says, this article offers a psychoanalytic perspective. Some of the concepts require explaining, but hopefully you will bear with me. So 8 years ago, I went through a phase of viewing the world through the magic glasses of David Icke, perhaps the most influential conspiracy author of our time. I get a lot of questions on David Icke as well, and this is about reptiles and hollow moon bases and things like this. And I say, yeah, no, that's some wild, crazy stuff. Make sure that you're always weighing things with logic and reason. You got to be careful with this kind of thing. So, from the use of vaccines as a mean of control and to the false flag mass unalivings orchestrated by government, to the cabal of lizard people disguised as humans and controlling global politics, I considered all of it as real possibilities. So this individual is talking about their own experience. They thought that these could be real possibilities, all those things. Lizard people disguised as humans controlling global politics. To have the freedom to doubt everything is refreshing in a way. That said, I never entertained the idea that as a red-pilled citizen, we should rise up en masse and take down our lizard-controlled institutions or whatever. So do you see the big difference here? Is, this guy's like entertaining the idea. Maybe it's true. Maybe lizard people are disguised as human and controlling global politics. But this individual is never going to, try and rise up against said lizard people. The individual's just merely entertaining the idea as a possibility. But you see, there's a very fine line, and it becomes very dangerous when people start taking it to be very true and literal and making very harmful and dangerous actions because of it. So did that make me a half-assed believer? Did it make me a coward and non-patriot? Since I knew the terrible truth and yet chose to sit behind my computer screen eating potato chips and do nothing about it. Actually, I didn't so much care whether Obama was a reptilian alien or not. I never met the guy, so who am I to say? Rather, I was more interested in this allegorical aspect, that we all have a deep part of the brain that is responsible for our primal survival instincts. By the way, I just want to be very clear. No one is a reptile, okay? No one is a literal reptile in the government controlling the world, all right? So, I mean, let's say, okay, it's extremely improbable, all right? Let's put it that way. But let's just continue. I want to make that clear though, because a lot of people come to my channel and don't know what I think. I just want to let you know what I think. You don't have to think the way I do, but that is my position. There are not. But this is really interesting what he's going to say here. So rather, I was more interested in this allegorical aspect, that we all have a deep part of our brain that is responsible for our primal survival instincts, such as fear and aggression, dominance, and territoriality, known as the Reptilian Complex. It's part of the three-tier model of the brain that was popularized by Carl Sagan back in the 1970s. So this three-tier model of the brain, or the triune brain theory, there's the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, and the neocortex. And this is a very, this isn't really used in like neuroscience or anything like that, or even psychology, because it's an extremely simplified model. It's very, very simple. But it can be a helpful way to understand the brain if you don't want to spend years studying psychology and neuroscience. So the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, and the neocortex just correspond to different areas of the brain and their functions. So you have the neocortex associated with the neocortex, and the reptilian brain is often associated with the brainstem, and it has to do with like survival instincts, fight, flight, reproduction, all those areas. And so I just want to be clear here that this is known as the reptilian brain, but it is a part of your brain. It's just called that. It's labeled that. So reading about the reptile brain did get me thinking. Was it necessary to activate your reptile brain to be successful in politics? Did I in some sense exhibit reptile traits? Who were the reptiles in my personal life? Who controlled their environment through fear and dominance? So this is really interesting. This guy is taking the whole reptile thing, like, oh, there's reptiles in the government, as being an allegory. Like not literally lizard people shape-shifting. He's more taking it in an allegorical sense, in a metaphorical sense. Like, oh, well, maybe those in politics have to use more of the functions associated with the reptilian brain, the brainstem. And so like dominance, being territorial, fear, aggression. So you see the difference here. While a lot of people might believe, oh, there's actually reptiles, this guy's taking it more as a metaphor or an allegory. Like, oh, well, people in politics behave or use more their reptilian brain to get ahead, to dominate, control, use fear, aggression. So allegorically speaking, we can call them reptiles. Like that is what this guy is saying. I don't think we should call them that, but that's what this person is saying. So it's important to understand here that this is a really good parallel, because you see the difference, and this goes back to religion as well. religion will talk about things metaphorically, and people will take it literally. And we talked about this in the video on Freemasonry, how in Freemasonry they describe Christ as being symbolic as, a form of consciousness. And Hegel, one of my favorite philosophers, love Hegel, was talking about how Christ is a metaphor or a story of the divine in man and humanity, meaning that humanity is divine. But people take this literally and, start believing that this was someone who actually was raised from the dead and walked on water and all that when these are just stories. So you can see how there's sort of a similarity here. So this is why one has to be very, very careful, because this is an example with regard to conspiracy theories, but you're going to find this in everything. You're going to find it in religion, and you're going to find it in like occult stuff, new age things like that. So you have to be really, really careful. Always be using logic and reason. Always be on guard. Make sure you're thinking for yourself. It's very important. And this is going to clearly illustrate why that is important. Because, all right, so let's just continue here, because we have a lot of things that I want to be able to talk to you about. So for instance, around this time, I started noticing certain behaviors in my supervisor at work. He was someone who was highly assertive, known to dominate conversations. He was also a lousy listener, deftly changing the topics that suited him and hearing only what he wanted to hear. I realized that he was afraid to listen to others, as if threatened his sense of authority. Fear as territoriality. He also had this annoying habit. When I would make a valid point that challenged his own thinking, he would not acknowledge it, but would later bring it up as if the idea were his own. Fear as intimidation / mirroring response. In a small way, perhaps, it was empowering to understand my supervisor in reptilian terms, such as using the features of the reptilian brain, all those things associated with the reptilian brain. So you can see the allegory that this individual was using, but not taking it literally. So, however, this relatively mundane story doesn't do... Yeah, okay, and you see when you start taking things literally, it gets dangerous. However, this relatively mundane story doesn't do justice to our topic. The reason why I bring it up is that it demonstrates the difference between ironic distance and earnest belief. More on this later. So, this is now called reality and fantasy. To better understand the appeal and danger of conspiracy theories, we have to move beyond these allegorist interpretations. We can't trivialize the ideas by saying, oh, it's not meant to be taken literally. The lizard people are just allegories for human emotions, and so on. Rather, the function of conspiratorial beliefs is to intensify subjective fantasy from within conventional reality. So I'll do my best to explain. Conventional reality is that which is agreed on by social consensus. For example, my relationship of being subordinate to my supervisor has a conventional quality. It's agreed upon that I perform the given tasks in exchange for a paycheck. I'm allowed to voice my opinion to the supervisor, but ultimately he is the higher authority, so I must abide by his decisions and so on. By fantasy, we refer to all the ways in which our personal subconscious issues, such as past traumas, complexes, unfinished businesses, etc., color our perception. As fantasies are subconsciously motivated, they shape our reality without our being aware of it. And this is extremely important as well. This is why we always talk about why it's so important to explore your unconscious mind and, really understand how your mind works, how things, were shaped as you were growing up, what your shadow self is, know thyself, because it will control your life. And, Carl Jung, it will control your life and you will call it fate. So you have to be able to understand and know your unconscious so you become the conscious controller of your life rather than being motivated by unconscious sources. So they shape our reality without being aware of it. For instance, my relationship with that supervisor might be interpreted as a repetition of certain experiences and patterns learned in my childhood. I am reliving my own issues by how I perceive his behavior and instinctively respond to him. So obviously, I'm not going to launch into my whole life story to explain what I mean by that. It's far too complicated and impersonal, and nobody would want to read it. But that's also the point. The world doesn't care about understanding your personal bull. At the end of the day, everyone has their own BS to deal with. So unless you have a therapist who's paid to listen, why would anyone care? Which brings us to the allure of conspiratorial beliefs. Such beliefs make possible the externalization of fantasy at the level of social discourse. Nobody may care about my tortured relationship with my boss, but when it comes to a high-profile public figures, powerful organizations and such, that's a story that everyone can latch onto. And such figures become part of the social imaginary. Now, why does this work? Fantasy constructs can be imported into just about every manner of social relationship, whether we're dealing with next-door neighbors or some random person online or some high-profile celebrity. The imagination will always make of the world its subjective theater. It's always possible to project meaning onto people's appearances, words, and behavior. So this is very important about projecting meaning onto something. So let's continue here. Thus, it's not quite as simple as saying that conspiracy theorists are confused about reality. That's too condescending. The fact is that we are all ignorant of how our subjective fantasies inform our lives. Our rationalizations regarding the normal are always in some way covering up the deeper issues that we would prefer not to recognize. While our social ties are sustained by common sense and expected behavior, these standards of normalcy are often what sustain the illusion, the appearance that nothing shameful or sinister is going on underneath the surface. One way to break through the illusion is to attack the very fabric of conventional knowledge, and this opens up a space for the expression of fantasy contents, which often do have a kernel of truth in them. So this is important, and just go with me here because this is going to come together and make sense. So we're talking about basically how people are guided and moved by their unconscious mind, and it's going to involve this projection of fantasy contents onto reality. So how does the mind react to the influx of imaginative contents that destabilize its sense of normalcy? This is where the superego is called to intervene. In Freudian terms, the superego is usually defined as the enforcer of morality and conscience. More broadly speaking, however, the superego has the role of keeping the fantasy at bay and to keep it from intruding on reality too much. It's here that things can go horribly wrong. When the superego is functioning normally, it might tell you something pretty boring, like, hey, all that nonsense about the reptilians, you don't literally believe it, do you? You wouldn't go out in public and act on these beliefs because you know you'll be laughed at, rejected, and proven wrong. Thus, even if the belief in lizard people may resonate with me on an emotional level, the superego forbids me from taking it too seriously. As a neurotically conditioned, that is, normally adjusted personality, I can never bring myself to allow the belief in lizard people to override my common sense to the point where I would go out and send death threats to the people who I consider to be lizards or whatever. And that might seem kind of funny, but it's not. It's actually very serious. I mean, we're talking about some crazy ideas about reptiles and stuff, but you have to understand a lot of people literally believe these things. And this doesn't just apply to conspiracy theories, but it comports over to so many different things, where if you believe in something literally, you can go and make very, very dangerous actions in the real world. So you have to be very conscious all the time. And this is why, I continually stress this, having grown up in a strict Christian household, which is, total and constant indoctrination. People don't realize how much that these conspiracy theories, or whatever they are, can really warp the way you see reality. And so it's very important to always be using logic and reason, and always questioning, always using logic and reason, always. So it's very important. You want to be a free thinker, like actually a free thinker. And and this is important, okay? When I say you need to be a free thinker, I mean you actually need to be a free thinker, not just so, yeah, I'm a free thinker. So it's important to understand how one thinks freely, how one can use reason to be able to be autonomous and think for themselves and make their own decisions and not just be manipulated. That's extremely important. So I just want to put that out there because, I have seen some people that are like, yeah, I'm a free thinker. And they're just falling in line with, some weird conspiracy theory that they've never actually checked, right? They've never actually done the homework to check it out. And that's the thing you got to do. Like when I started to step away from Christianity, why? Because I started to examine it rationally. I started looking at all the evidence for it, all the evidence against it, and realizing, hey, this doesn't seem, something's wrong here. This is not measuring up. So that's what's important, to always be questioning, always be using reason. So let's see. So the guy's talking about how for him, and due to his superego, his common sense would override it, and he's not going to actually go out and do something. The fantasy is kept repressed at a safe distance. So that's why I'm stuck with the non-literal, allegorical interpretation of lizard people as described earlier. When the superego malfunctions, its denial of fantasy goes through a profound reversal. Okay, so when the superego malfunctions, its idea of fantasy goes through a reversal. Rather than reject the content of fantasy as being untrue or merely allegorical, the superego seeks to make it the conventional reality by any means possible. So this is the critical difference here. When the superego malfunctions, its denial of fantasy goes through a reversal. Instead of rejecting the content as being fantasy, the superego strives by any means possible to make it the conventional reality. And such means include hyperzealous demonstration of belief, often in group settings with like-minded believers. We can understand this as the bandwagon effect as well. Just because the majority believe it doesn't mean it's true. Just because you have a group of people that believe it doesn't mean that it's true. Just because you're gathering with a bunch of people and you're like, hey, you believe this? I believe it too. You believe it? Yeah. Suddenly it seems a lot more real, doesn't it? If you have a group of people all believing the same thing, it reinforces the reality of it. But you're not being a free thinker if you see that is just that is not being rational. It doesn't matter what the people around you think. No, it does not matter. Doesn't matter if 10 people believe it, 50 people believe it, 100 people, 1,000, 1 billion. Doesn't matter. But your mind wants to believe it, and so it creates this conventional reality like, oh, see how many people wow, it must be true. So that's really important to understand. So aggressive shutting out of opposing viewpoints, withdrawal into one's own reality bubble. And this is important as well. This withdrawal into one's own reality bubble is also extremely, one has to be very, very careful of. And this means, for example, with Christianity, not that that's like a conspiracy theory or anything, but there's a lot of parallels. It's all about you read the Bible. You read the Bible constantly. You go to church. You pray. You read devotionals. You watch TV shows that are Christian TV shows. You're just constantly consuming Christian content, and you stay away from things that would challenge that belief because it's a sin. And so you're in this bubble that's just constantly reinforcing that belief, constantly reinforcing that belief, constantly reinforcing that belief. And that's not good. You have to be able to, there's nothing wrong with looking at material that you want to look at, but you have to make sure that you're not being trapped in a bubble that's making you not be able to see clearly. That's why I always say, people go, hey, what should I study? I always say, take a Philosophy 101 course. And I hope that some people listen to me when I say that, because I know it sounds kind of boring or whatever, but it's not. Look, it's really important to understand how to think critically and how to think rationally. This is a skill that one can develop. So seriously, the Philosophy 101 classes, it's not like you have to go to a college and sign up. You could, that would be great. But there's free ones online. There's playlists of Philosophy 101 courses. There's one that's 14 videos long. Probably not even that, maybe 9 or 12, 45 minutes each. You could watch it in a month. You could watch it in a week if you really wanted to. But that's what's really, really important. Understanding how to think logically and critically and not just being absorbed into this constant reinforcement of one's beliefs. So suppression of any dissent from within one's group, labeling non-believers as evil or controlled by evil forces. You can see a lot of parallels as well with religion. So tribalist narratives about the war between good and evil. And so I want to talk about this one. This one's really important. So tribalist narratives about the war between good and evil. And so this is a common thing where it's the vilifying of the other, vilifying of the alien, the other, that which is not me. This war between good and evil. Now, there's something I want to, very important here. So this is specifically targeting real world groups that must be eradicated for the fantasy to become true, such as political parties, ethnic groups, religions, etc. Now, so this is very, very scary because I'm sure that you can think of groups that have eliminated other groups of people in the past, and it is horrible. But this is how things get really, really dangerous. And I want to make this really clear because I'm against mainstream religion. And they mention religion here, okay? But I want to be very, very clear. I'm against mainstream religion as an ideology, not people, okay? I'm against the literalist interpretation of religion. So if you know that it's a metaphor or a story or whatever, that's fine. If you think of it as an allegory. But if you start believing in it literally and you want to hurt others because they don't, or you start treating, like LGBTQ or someone you might not disagree, you start treating other people as bad, that's a problem. So I want to make it clear that this is an issue, because these when you take something literally to be true in these religions, it becomes its own system that is being discussed here. So I want to make that clear as well, because it's not about eradication and elimination. We've seen that in history. That's horrible. It obviously doesn't work. It's stupid. It's disgusting. It's primitive and horrific. What we need to do is synthesize and transcend. And by synthesizing and transcending, and this is dialectically, like Hegel knew that this is a dialectical result. You go from Vorstellung, picture thinking, to reason. And this is not through eliminating people. This is about transcending. And how does one transcend? Well, it's about realizing, for example, that these religions are just metaphors and stories. And then we can all understand that. So it's not about eradicating groups of people or banning Bibles or anything like that. Remember, reality operates like a mind. So doing that is like trying to repress a part of yourself. It doesn't work. You have to integrate. You have to work with it. You have to, and that's what's really important. So I want to make that clear, because it's extremely important when it comes to building a world where we have freedom for everyone. We want freedom for everyone, and we don't want to have limiting beliefs being opposed upon others or terrible tactics being taken. That's gross and that's disgusting. So these methods serve to appease the superego just as well, but why? So the superego does not care about the truth as such. What it cannot tolerate is the non-literal nature of fantasy, okay? So let's say that, read this again, because this is really important. The superego, it does not care about truth as such. But what it cannot tolerate is the non-literal nature of fantasy. To emphasize again, subjective reality is largely constituted by objects which are stand-ins for some past trauma, unresolved issues, etc. Things are not quite what they appear on the surface. There is always a deeper meaning in which we are all enmeshed. It's this unbridgeable gap between desire and its object representation that the superego hates. A normal superego deals with this gap by forbidding us from imagining too much. It basically says, get a grip. Forget about all this personal, emotional BS. Just be normal, get in line, do your job, follow the rules, etc. A malfunctioning superego attempts to close the gap, not by suppressing fantasy, but by making it into literal truth. This is achieved by creating social environments where the beliefs are accepted as being literally true and people really behave as such. And we can see this in, like QAnon and all this stuff. And it's very... and one of the reasons why because we, talk about things like Freemasonry and secret societies and occult stuff. And, there's some interesting stuff there, but I always say that one has to be very, very careful. And I do not agree with a lot of the ways they do things because they can be highly, highly manipulative. And there's certain examples, like, for example, in the Golden Dawn where all the information comes from the secret chiefs, and it's like, ooh, the secret chiefs sent this information. Let's see what it is. And this is all a tactic of fantasy to be able to cultivate this this culture in a manipulative way. And it uses these tactics, which they're describing in terms of the super ego. So, let me see here. Okay. So, and I want to say here, right? So he's talking about how a normal superego says, get in line, just follow the rules, right? Just do what's normal, basically. And then the opposite is when, instead of suppressing it, it tries to turn this fantasy into truth. And this is achieved by creating social environments where the beliefs are accepted and, all the different things that we listed before. And there's more to it than that as well. But the thing I want to emphasize is that this doesn't mean that you should never, because the superego, when it's operating correctly, as being described by the writer, is basically telling you to forget all this stuff, just do your job, follow the rules, get in line. Now, that's not necessarily good. What we want to do is to be able to use logic and reason to be able to see what should be true and what is false. So what I'm saying here is that it's not as though, everything that is conventional and normal is what is good and what is to be accepted. No, that's not what is being said. What is being said is that one, it's not what I'm talking about here. What I want to get across is that logic and reason must be used to examine incoming information, and then if it passes logic and reason and critical examination, then you can make the choice to believe it or not. So you don't want to just only believe in what is conventional and standard and normal, because there's a lot of things that are conventional and standard and normal that are very wrong with this world. That should be obvious. So that's not what we want to do. But we also don't want to believe in everything that just comes along and start projecting this fantasy on reality. And you see a really good example in New Age beliefs. So New Age beliefs are very intuitive, and there's a lot of cool things that they hit on that are true. But they just, start believing in like everything that comes by, like ascended masters and 5D consciousness and, quantum timelines and like all these different things that most people who even say these things don't even know what it is that they're talking about. But they create this culture where everyone else is believing it too, so it gets reinforced. And then you have, just a lot of fantasy being, being believed in. And it's actually interesting that QAnon, there's a lot of spiritual New Ageism that goes along in QAnon, because that type of, that type of thinking goes hand in hand. So that's a really good example to see where there are some interesting ideas in New Age, but they just believe everything and then, project this idea onto reality. And so it's not about just believing everything that comes through. And it's not about rejecting everything because it's simply not normal or not conventional. It's about examining everything with logic and reason. And that's why one must be the master of their own mind. And it's kind of sad that I even have to say this, but most people aren't. Most people are not. So please, I beg of you, pretty please, take a Philosophy 101 course. All right, I know it's not as interesting as like magic and the occult and whatever. Please take a Philosophy 101 course. I promise it will allow you to become a more free thinker, a more autonomous individual, and it's important especially in our world today, with so much bullshit going on, conspiracy theories everywhere, people acting out of their minds. But there also is a lot of conventional normal things, so-called conventional normal things that aren't good, that are also ruining the world. So we also need to be aware of that. So, I understand there's a lot, sometimes it's hard to know what to believe. There's so, well, is it true or isn't it true? I see a lot of people who are just really confused. They don't know what to believe. Well, should I trust the government or should I not trust the government? Or some people just genuinely don't know what to believe. And that's where studying things like philosophy and whatnot, how to think critically, reasoning skills will really come into play. Because when you see new information comes in on your TikTok or whatever, and you're like, oh, I wonder if that's true or not, you can start to use, the tools that you have acquired via logic and reason to be able to, know if that information is true or not. And like I said as well, a lot of things that we talked about here today with regard to conspiracy theories go hand in hand with religion, and like New Age mysticism and all that. So always be on guard of your mind. It's very important. Always question, no matter what. Question what you read, question me, question what you watch on, videos, on TikTok, on all that stuff. All right. Super important. Make sure you do it. Watch a Philosophy 101 course. I'll tell you, what? If you watch, because I'm going to post this replay, tell me in the comments if you watched a Philosophy 101 course, and I want to see lots of comments, please. So if you enjoy my work, please like and subscribe. And if you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon. Helps out a lot. I have a lot more videos. Check out my channel for a lot of playlists related to the nature of reality and things like that. Check it out. I want to give a big shout out to everyone that does support on Patreon. I really appreciate it. And if you do support on Patreon, you get access to our weekly secret live streams, our Discord server, all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun. So I want to give a shout out to Zach, Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Michael, Angela, Maria, Top of the World, Ethan, DB, Storm the Delta, and everyone else. I appreciate it very much.